At this time, I would like to call the Governance Subcommittee meeting to order. Board members, as I call your name, please reply present for the public record. Vice President Wright, present. Secretary Ramsdale.
Present.
Treasurer Green.
Present.
Trustee McIntosh.
Present.
Trustee Perry.
Present.
Okay, thank you. There are 5 board members present. At this time, the board shall hear any comments from the public. Members of the public are reminded that the Board of Education, by its bylaw 1370, are not obligated to answer questions, make statements, or commitments in response to issues raised by the public. In general, such issues will be referred to the superintendent for investigation, study, or recommendation. Any public members wishing to speak must raise their hand in the chat section of this platform to alert Stephen that you wish to speak. Stephen will state your name prior to unmuting your microphone. You will have 3 minutes to address the board. It is important that you state your name and address for the public record before you begin to speak. At this time, Stephen, is there anyone wishing to speak to the board?
Good evening, board. I currently do not have any questions in the chat nor any hands raised for public comment.
All right, thank you, Stephen. The public is reminded that they may send an email to Flint Board of Education, or FBOE, at flintschools.org to submit comments and have them read at the next meeting. Thank you. In your packet we will now approve the minutes. In your packets are the minutes from the October 13th, 2020 Governance Subcommittee meeting. These minutes will be forwarded to the full board and included in the November 18th, 2020 regular board meeting packet. At this time, we will move to our items. We will be looking at bylaws, board bylaws, sections 1100, 1152, and 1300. And I will ask Mrs. Stewart to address the committee.
Thank you. Good evening.
Good evening.
Okay, so for Stephen, can I share my screen or do you have it? I'm sorry.
Just pass it off to you.
Thank you. Okay. Where did it go? Okay, here we go. I think we have it. Do you guys see the board bylaws?
Yes, I do.
Okay, awesome. Okay, thank you. Thank you.
Can you make it bigger?
Yes, ma'am. I sure can.
Thanks, because boy, that's tiny.
Yeah.
Okay,
That's good enough?
that's good. Thank you.
You're welcome. Okay. So the very first recommendation for change to the board bylaws, the board bylaws shall be composed of 9 members. So the recommendation is to change it to what we currently have. The board shall be composed of 7 members. That is the first change. For school district elections, the board shall consist of 9 members, and the recommendation is for it to be changed to the board shall consist of 7 members. The next change is newly elected non-incumbent board members shall not assume the duties of their office prior to January 1st. Prior to entering upon the duties of their office, each newly elected or appointed. So that's another change. Before it said July 1.
Oh,
Okay. And then I'm gonna, probably, would it be better to show, maybe it'll be better to show you this, where we have the strikeout version. Would that be best? Okay, let's do that. Let's go there. Thank you, Ms. Green. So you can see here, it's changing it from July to January, with the organizational meeting being in January.
Mhm.
Okay, that's better, thank you. All right. And then here, this is in regards to the organizational meeting that's held in July, sorry.
okay.
Let me know if I'm moving too fast.
Oh,
Anita, the organizational meeting, I guess it has never been held in July since I've been on the board. So I think this is just, maybe at some point they did have it in July, but now we're trying to adjust it so that it fits with what's going on.
So this sounded like to me that you have two organizational meetings. You have one in July where you look at legal counsel and retaining independent auditors. So that's what this sounded like when speaking with the Williams firm, that you have two.
Yes, yes.
So
We used to do it all on the July meeting. Everything was
Okay.
done on the organizational meeting. We've
Okay,
never had two meetings.
okay.
so
Yeah, that July meeting would be a very long meeting.
So was there ever a time when elections for board members were held later in the year?
that's
No,
what
they were held early. I was elected in May,
That's what I mean, yeah.
and the first time I was elected, I was elected in May, and then after that, I was elected in June, and then we ended up, because of the governor Snyder going through all these changes he wanted to go through, then we had to end up changing everything around.
Okay. So are we just gonna change this to January?
Yeah.
Okay. I'm sorry, Mrs. Wright, were you getting ready to say
No, I
something?
was just thinking that it seems like I saw somewhere that when we had elections like that were not part of like the regular elections that take place in
Right.
November, we had
Yes.
that the boards had to pay for them. Was
That-
that correct? So when we went
Yeah.
to the regular meetings along with, other elected officials, we didn't have to pay for them anymore.
But that was under Governor Snyder.
Oh, okay. Okay.
it wasn't.
Okay, so we'll change this to say January. Okay. So all of this will have to be changed to say January. Okay. So this will need, the part that we have struck out for item 3 will need to be put back, and then the month will just need to reflect January.
Yeah.
Yes.
Okay. All right.
Well, that's when they changed too, that they suggested we go to 6-year terms because
Mhm.
they changed how they did, what was it, Vera? Did they change how often we were elected or
No.
how we would run them?
We
So we didn't have to pay for them, though, right?
You had to do 6-year terms, because if you did 4-year terms that it had gotten down to, you were losing half of your board, the majority of your board. So we all had to go to 6-year terms, so we would only lose 3 people each time the elections came about.
Yeah, okay.
Again, Governor Snyder messed all this stuff up.
Well, there's a long line for the stuff Governor Snyder messed up.
So everything that's here, because there was a recommendation to move some things from July to January, all of these things will still apply for the January organizational meeting.
Mm-hmm.
Should.
Okay. And so 1,300. So as of right now, through the end of the year, December, we can, you guys can still have virtual meetings. As of January, that will no longer be in effect, okay? And so the recommendation is to change your bylaw so that you can have face-to-face and virtual meetings. So if there's someone who needs to participate in a virtual meeting, he or she may still be able to participate in your board meeting virtually. And so this is the recommendation for changing that by the Williams firm for section 1,300.
Can I ask a question here?
Go ahead, Mrs.
You know, I'm thinking just of committee meetings now. I mean, just of subcommittee meetings like this one, that a lot of times they're really quite short. And so maybe that to hold committee meetings and committee of the whole meetings in person when that has to happen. But if we could keep the committee, the subcommittee meetings to online, that would cut down on people traveling and all having to be in one place. I think that might be easier, and of course it won't affect me because I'll be gone, but I was thinking about the convenience for subcommittee meetings of being online without us having to go to Southwestern or go to ad building or for people to do that. So and that would just be subcommittee, not committee of the whole or regular board meetings. So I just wanted to put that idea out there. So I'll just leave it at that. It can be talked about later.
Mrs. Stewart,
Yes, ma'am.
the whole issue of online or virtual meetings, is that only during this time of COVID, or is it something that we are revising that we can do from this point on?
So we still have to follow Open Meetings Act and what Open Meetings Act says. But as of right now, I think Attorney Williams and President Lester's concern was the way your bylaw is written, it says that you guys have to be face to face. And so it makes it very difficult for Attorney Williams to argue that you can be virtual or some of your people can be virtual because of the way your bylaws are written. And so this recommendation is to give you some flexibility with being able to do both versus being held to just the one by your bylaw.
But my question is though, is this just for now, or are we talking about being able to have meetings virtually or face to face from now on, like forever, even after COVID is over?
So Monica, I know you're a little more versed in Open Meetings Act than I am. Can you jump in? Does Open Meetings Act hold you to this, or would they still have the flexibility once the pandemic is over to be able to do both?
It will allow them. Hi, board. Good evening.
Hello.
Brad Banasek from MASB held a virtual conference as well, and he did share with school districts across the state that the board members will continue to have the ability to meet remotely beyond the pandemic, as long as we've adopted a policy that allows us to.
Oh, that
Okay. That was the answer to my question. Thank you.
Yes.
Did anyone else have a question or a comment? Okay, go ahead, Mrs. Stewart.
And the next section just deals with your board meetings.
So that's saying at minimum, we have to have one meeting per month.
Yes.
So that takes care of the idea that we don't get summers off. Those summers off.
Mhm.
So we have to have a meeting in July and August, or June and July, however that works.
Mhm.
See, prior to this, we would get the month of,
July, wasn't it?
yeah, we would get July off and we'd come back in August. Prior to Snyder doing his thing.
Mhm. And then this just adds the section to cover is so a board member has to join remotely, what needs to happen. And so the board, let's see, the board member has to identify his or herself and let the public know that they're joining remotely.
They don't, do they have to add their address? Did I see that there someplace?
So no, this is just, it's so, we have to also let public members be able to join remotely. And so we have to put the address where they can log in.
Okay.
We have to make sure that that is visible on our website so that they know how to log in remotely as well.
Thank you.
Welcome.
You can proceed, Mrs. Stewart.
The last section was, it was just cleaning up some grammatical error for the last section,
Mhm.
for the special meeting section. And then there's one more piece. Just talks about the notice of 36 hours. And then they just cleaned it up to say containing all information required by OMA, Open Meetings Act.
Mhm.
And that's it. Those were the revisions thus far that were recommended by the Williams firm. Any questions?
Any questions or comments regarding the information Mrs. Stewart has presented?
Nope, not for me.
No.
So this information will be included in our regular board packets, and we'll move forward for review. And I also asked Mrs. Stewart and Monica to add the board bylaws related to policy, and it is 1530 adoption and amendment of bylaws. Because it talks about the process for revising or adding policy. So I just felt that was useful information to have. So I don't know.
Can you still see my screen?
Was this email to all of the board members that are on the governance committee?
No, ma'am, but can you guys still see my screen?
Yeah.
Okay, so I have pulled it up for you, but I will definitely email it to you guys right away. But this is, let me see if I can highlight it.
Mm-hmm.
Highlight. It is this section right here that Mrs. Wright is referring to. There we go. There you go.
Can you enlarge that some, please?
Yes, I sure can. Every time I change, it goes smaller. Is that large enough for you, Ms. Perry?
Yes, that's better.
Okay. Mm-hmm.
Would it be okay if I read that section?
That's fine.
Okay, it says the bylaws may be amended in whole or in part by a majority vote of the members elected or appointed to and serving on the board at any regular or special board meeting if at least 7 days prior to the meeting at which the amendment will be proposed, a written notice of the date, time, and place of the meeting stating that amendments to the bylaws will be proposed and unabridged copies of the proposed amendments are delivered
Where are
to.
you reading?
No, that's,
That's not where we are.
Oh, I'm sorry. I'm reading the wrong part. Is it set
Right.
page 78, Anita?
1510, page 77.
Right. I'm looking at 1530. I'm sorry. It says this is under adoption. Okay, I see it. The board president shall submit proposed policies to the board in writing at a regular meeting or special meeting for first reading and discussion. Yeah, this is the right. Recommendations for change, which have the consensus of the board, shall be known to the superintendent. The final version of the proposed policy shall be presented for second reading or adoption at the next regular meeting of the board unless otherwise ordered. Under unusual circumstances, the board may take immediate action on a proposed policy. Policy shall take effect at the time of approval unless otherwise specified. And that's the one that I really thought that I want to share, because in all the time I've been on the board, I've never read that because I didn't understand the whole first reading, second reading stuff. So that is policy 1510. So that's why we do a first and a second reading.
Mhm.
And it's important to note that we don't have to if there are extenuating circumstances. So, all right, I apologize for reading the wrong thing because I was like, what in the world is this? It sounded
It's okay.
strange. I apologize for that.
Would you guys still like for me to email this to you, or are you okay with what just took place?
I'm okay with it.
I'm good.
Okay. All right. Anything else for board bylaws before I defer to Mrs. Washington?
Thank you.
Okay. All right. So I'm going to defer to Mrs. Washington.
Thank you, Mrs. Stewart. Good evening, board.
Good
Good evening.
And Mrs. Washington, I have it on my screen so I can share whatever it is that you want me to share.
I see. Thank you so much. Okay.
You're welcome.
So before we begin, going into the remote work policy, I just wanted to share some background in regards to the new rule and regulation, just for everyone's information. So in October, the Michigan Occupational Safety and Health Administration, which is MIOSHA for us, declared rules to clarify the safety requirements employers must follow to protect their employees from COVID-19. So this has been established as the emergency rules. So the emergency rule 5, section 8 specifically states that all employers must create a policy prohibiting in-person work for employees to the extent that their work activities can feasibly be completed remotely. And so this particular rule applies to all employers covered under the MIOSHA Act, and the emergency policy must remain in effect for 6 months following the effective date. And so it is set to expire on April 14th, 2021, unless that rule is extended or unless the board chooses to extend the emergency policy. So there's also an enforcement of the policy and penalty if an employer does not have a policy in place, beginning at a $7,000 fine for employers who violate the rules, up to a $10,000 fine and possibly 1 year imprisonment or both for any willful violation that causes an employee's death by not adhering to the policy. So later on in November, early November the 6th, the Michigan Department of Health and Human Services issued new guidance for employers that clarified the MIOSHA emergency rules. And what really sticks out specifically is that employers should only permit in-person work when attendance is strictly required to perform job duties. And so the focal point is strict requirement. And so what that means is that in-person work is only permitted when a worker is unavailable to physically complete his or her job task in a remote setting. So as a result of these new rules and regulations that were declared by MIOSHA as well as the Michigan Department of Health and Human Services, we worked together to draft a temporary remote work policy for this compliance within the district. And so that's what you see here on the screen is a temporary remote work policy for Michigan Occupational Safety and Health Administration compliance. And so this policy references the emergency rule that was established on October the 14th, 2020, and also talks about the reason for creating a policy, which is the reference to prohibiting remote work for employees to the extent that their activities can be feasibly completed remotely. What this policy does is provides the district not only with compliance, but also with flexibility to be able to call staff back to work should anything change. Can you go back up a little bit, Ms. Stewart? So the policy begins with defining feasibility. And so feasibility is practicality of remote work. So basically talking about the employee being able to provide their essential duties remotely with having the right internet access, as well as being able to protect and access confidential student and personnel and financial information. Also talks about the need to supervise, direct, or evaluate students or personnel. The need to provide direct physical services to students, such as speech or occupational therapy. And then also taking into considerations the working conditions outlined in applicable collective bargaining agreements. And then any other relevant factors aligned to work determined by the superintendent or the designee. Section B, are there any questions before I proceed?
I got a question.
Go ahead, Ms. Green.
Hi, Mrs. Washington. How are you?
I'm good, Ms. Green. How are you?
Good, thank you. I'm trying to clarify the word temporary. Does this mean we'll have a final draft, or this document is just temporary?
This policy is temporary in accordance with the compliance of MIOSHA. It's only in effect for 6 months.
Okay.
So it can be extended if the emergency rule through MIOSHA is extended, or if the board wants to adopt the policy for more than 6 months.
Okay. Thank you so much.
Okay. So section B talks about if the district returns to providing in-person instruction, which employees may not work remotely. And so it has a list of employees there, or classifications there, who would actually need to return to work to provide support services to our scholars should we return to in-person instruction. Stewart? Okay, and then section C talks about if we're only providing online instruction, that we may determine which employee groups can feasibly work remotely and effectively to perform their job duties and responsibilities. And also providing that flexibility that an employee may be called into in-person work if it is determined that the individuals cannot adequately provide all of their essential functions, excuse me, remotely. And then section D goes on to talk about the district having the flexibility to consider the use of both remote work and on-site duties for certain instruction, certain types of instruction. And so this would be done on a short-term basis, up to 10 working days. And you can see there the different categories of or types of instruction where these individuals may work in a blend of remote or on-site instruction, depending on what they're doing. So from physical education all the way through early childhood. And then lastly is just the policy on section E, is talking about individuals with a disability may request remote work as a reasonable accommodation for that disability when it is confirmed by a physician's note. And also that we will engage in an interactive process in compliance and in accordance with ADA, which is the process that the district conducts now anyway when anyone sends in a doctor's note that is requesting a reasonable accommodation. We actually connect with that person and review on a case-by-case basis to determine what reasonable accommodations are that will help the employee continue to do their job with accommodations. And it talks about also granting remote work as a reasonable accommodation during the pandemic shall be temporary. And it does not obligate the district to grant remote work as a continuing reasonable accommodation after the expiration of this emergency rule. So this does not lock the district into past practice of providing remote work should we return in a pandemic and we have a vaccine for the pandemic. If an individual has a doctor's note for an accommodation, it is not a requirement based on past practice for the district to provide remote work. So that section makes sure that it is clear within the policy so that employees or others won't go refer back to past practice and say, okay, well, during the pandemic, you provided it, and now you're saying that, it is no longer being offered. But we will continue to review individuals' doctor's notes who have a disability on a case-by-case basis and make the best reasonable accommodation to support their work. And so lastly, in section F, it talks about the policy does not limit the district's ability to determine a method of instruction for students, in the best interest of students. And then section G talks about the policy would expire on April 14, 2021. And just kind of reiterates the answer to your question, Ms. Green, unless the emergency rule is extended or unless it is, the board wants to extend the policy. And so, so this policy, was drafted. We conferred with TRUM to ensure the appropriate compliance language and legal references were expressed in the policy. We also reviewed the COVID-19 emergency rules filed with the Secretary of State on October the 14th. So once this policy, when agreed upon, it will serve as our guiding principle for the next 6 months regarding remote work. That way we will be able to apply a fair and equitable process for any individuals who have a circumstance for which remote work would need to be considered. And that's it.
That sounds good.
Thank you.
Thank you. That sounds good, actually. Sounds fair.
Great,
Any
thank
other
you.
questions or comments from board members? Ms. Green?
I have a question about the doctor's notes, because I've had doctor's notes when I worked at GM, and some supervisors would accept them or make accommodations. I'm just wondering, is it a specific policy or procedure for somebody who brings in a note from a doctor? Because we can get some legitimate notes and we can get some other kind of notes, right? So I'm just wondering, is it a specific procedure that's followed, and who ultimately decides whether this doctor's notes is going to require for us to accommodate that employee?
Yes, there is a procedure. All of the doctor's notes are to be submitted directly to Human Resources. Debbie Sipple and myself, we review each of the doctor's notes for the not necessarily the diagnosis, but the documentation, the documented condition and then the restriction that is being requested or required based upon that. So it must identify what that condition is. It must have a period of accommodation for the request. It must talk about the restriction, which is advised by the physician. If it does not have that information included, we contact the physician's office to get additional information. If the accommodation is recommended, and it poses an undue hardship for the district based upon the individual's classification or need to be on site, or just any other considerations, we contacted the doctor again, and we work with that doctor for alternative reasonable accommodations. And so we make sure that each of the doctor's notes includes those elements for us to review.
Okay. So dang, I forgot my question. Shoot. So, sorry guys, I was talking to my mom. So dang, I forgot my question. Shoot. So when they do a doctor's note, oh, is it a form that a doctor fills out? Because I know when I got doctor's notes, it was just like real basic and simple. I mean, things may have changed, but is it like a form that doctors fill out so they can answer all those questions so the employee can know exactly, you know, what the district is looking for so they can make sure the doctor provides that information?
Well, a doctor's notes for accommodations in our current climate is from a physician's office on letterhead. But a doctor's note for FMLA or any other type of leave actually has to fill out the form to document the condition and the restrictions that are required.
So it is a doctor's form for this specific type of situation, or is no, not for this specific one, just a doctor's note?
It's just a doctor's note for the remote work, but anytime a leave is requested, they have to complete the actual physician's certificate for approval.
But this is not that, right?
Correct.
Something different. See, I'm not talking about the, you know, the FMLA or any, I'm just talking about this specifically in this policy. So there's no form, it's just a doctor's note. Okay, just wanted to make sure. Thank you.
Yes, because this is not a leave, it's just a request for remote work as an accommodation. Yes.
I get that. I was just surprised that you intertwined the two and it kind of threw me off. But I got you.
Okay.
Thank you.
Any other questions? Carol, Ms. Perry, Mrs. Ramsdale?
I think it's a good policy, and, you know, and they give you good guidelines.
Okay. All right. Well, this, the first reading of this policy, the temporary remote work policy for Michigan Occupational Safety and Health Administration compliance will be included in the regular board meeting packet on November 18, 2020 for a first reading and a full board review, and then for a second reading and adoption at the December 9th, 2020 Board Committee of the Whole. All right. Oh, I think I didn't just lose everybody, did I? My screen just, oh, there you are. Are there any questions, any other questions or comments? Mrs. Green? I can't hear you.
Okay.
Can you guys hear me? Oh, okay.
Yes, we can hear you.
My daughter and my birthday is December 8th, so I will not be on that meeting. Just FYI.
Okay. All right. Happy birthday in advance.
Well, somebody got it.
And my nephew birthday. I forgot my nephew birthday on that day too. Oops. Birthday.
Okay.
My mama just reminded me.
Oh, okay. I do have one comment that I want to add, and I guess it could be considered governance, but it may not be. But I had been in conversation with Mrs. Stewart regarding her evaluation, because as you know, the vice president sort of does the evaluation for the superintendent. And I really think it's important that Mrs. Stewart gets at least a mid-year evaluation from this board. So I'm kind of requesting or asking you guys to be okay with us sort of adding to tomorrow's committee of the whole a conversation regarding a mid-year evaluation for Mrs. Stewart, so that at least the board that knows her can be a part of that. And hopefully we'll be able to complete that evaluation in our December meeting, if that, so I'm hoping that that will be okay with you all. Any question or comment about that?
I think it's an excellent idea and a very valid reasons.
Okay, so it's gonna be kind of on the rush to get it done by December before this board changes, but I think that it will be fair to her to have this board do that first evaluation for her.
I agree.
So that'll probably have to be added to the agenda at tomorrow's meeting by whatever process we need to do that. Mrs. Stewart and Monica, are you here? You hearing me on that one?
Yes,
I'm here.
So you would probably have
Okay.
to
We'll probably have to do what?
make a motion for that.
Yeah. Oh, well, I'm sure they'll help me figure it out. Thank you, Miss Carol. So that's the only other comment I have, unless you all have something. Okay, well, seeing no further discussion, I declare the governance subcommittee meeting adjourned. Good night, everybody.
Good night.